show as we get started. Have a distinguished guest, one of the great trainers in the world, Jeremiah Minor, who I happen to know actually. Feels really good, and I'm glad to have him here as a host. I have a lot of questions to give and ask him. And without further ado, again, this is Jeremiah Minor. Could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, hi, Ron. Thanks, and good to see you. I know it's been a while since we were teaching under the same roof, but those were always really fun times. Yeah, thanks for having me on. So I work for Dion Training. I'm the lead networking and cybersecurity instructor there at Dion Training. Overall, Dion Training creates asynchronous content for users at a relatively low price to be able to come in and learn and prepare for tech certifications. So anything in the IT cybersecurity industry, there's a series of instructors, of which I am one, that get to create that content and make it available both on diontraining.com and on Udemy.
All right, that is great. Now, one of the first questions, Jeremiah, for listeners who may not be familiar with Dion training, what makes your approach to IT and cybersecurity training different than the other training providers? That
Yeah,
was
that's a
one of
great
the
question.
questions.
Yeah, I think one of the things I've already mentioned is we do come in at a low price. We do sell our products on Udemy, which is great because I just looked up one of my courses as a price comparison. So I have a Linux Plus course on Udemy right now with Dion Training that's going for, at least on my browser here, $13. No, I'm sorry. Oh, that's $13 a month. Oh, there's no big sale right now on Udemy, but you always have to just wait around a few hours and something comes down to about the $13 to $15 mark. So yeah, that's about what the courses go for. Something else that I think is really interesting about Dion Training, and one of the things that made it really fun to become part of the team, was that the instructors are not just trainers. So we've all owned businesses in tech. I've owned several businesses outside of tech as well. But I guess what I'm trying to say is that our instructors come from uh, come from the industry. We're not just in a classroom. We're not just schooled at home. We're actually out there meeting with clients and learning our craft, if you will, before we put it into a presentation for learning and students.
That is great. I know I have went through your course, so and I know it's been a wealth of knowledge and it helped me so much so that one of my previous ventures I was able to get it by actually going through your course. Another person had a question. Given your background as a lead cybersecurity network instructor at Dion Training, what are the most critical foundation skills expiring IT professionals should focus on today to launch a successful career?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I think the answer was right in the question that you asked right there. I think the fundamentals are what we need to focus on. More and more, there is tech available to make things easier, but if we don't go back to the fundamentals and understand how it works from the beginning, what that baseline is, then adding on all the extra tools just becomes extra tools. And once we don't understand that, then we no longer are able to effectively apply them. For instance, I see a lot of people who want, that Security Plus CompTIA certification, and it's a great certification. But one thing that I often mention to folks is networking is important there, right? It is an assumption to go into security, because if you don't understand networking, then you're not going to be able to apply security to a network. So I think those foundations, those fundamentals, that's where I like to talk with people about starting prior to reaching out for the certification that is most interesting to them.
That is absolutely correct, and I've taken that approach. And you speak to that ground, and you have security, but don't know how to effectively protect a network. Gets a little hilarious here. Let's take a look. So now the evolving threat landscape, you got all the tech news. With cybersecurity threats evolving, what current industry trends are emerging threats do you believe entry level or mid-level IT professionals need to be paying closest attention to right now?
Yeah. Um, I'd like to kind of open the door for a discussion about AI. And first, let me just kind of give you some background on me. When it first came out, right? When that That winter time that ChatGPT first came out, I was not a believer. I didn't think it was going to help. I recognized that there were hallucinations within the different large learning models, and that made it unreliable and unpredictable to me. And what I've come to realize over time is whatever day we say this, it's true. AI is as worse as it's ever going to be today, right now. Tomorrow, it's going to be better. So I think that's something that we can't look away from. And I think that myself included, when AI first started becoming available, and there was that initial kind of threat of, oh my gosh, is this going to take away from what I do? Is this going to take my job? And I think that what we really need to do is accept that it is there, it is available, it is not going to go away, and we need to start embracing how AI can help us and make us more efficient. And I've seen it through many different applications. Coding is one of them. I would say that for basic level programming, you no longer need to sit down and study a particular genre or a particular type of coding language. AI can help you get there. And then once you understand pseudocode, once you understand the basic structures of a language, AI can help you translate one language to another, so that you can program in different languages. So, what I would say, what do we need to focus on? What do we need to recognize as a threat? First, AI is not a threat necessarily to our jobs. We need to learn to embrace it. We need to learn to use it to make our jobs more efficient. As far as what threats are out there in the landscape, attackers are doing the same thing. I teach penetration testing, certified ethical hacking, and AI is another topic there in that field as well. How is AI going to help the attackers become more efficient? And it is, right? And we see that already. One of the examples that comes to mind that I was talking with someone about just this week was about fakes, right? A fake on someone's voice, a fake on someone's image, a moving picture that could be integrated into a phone call or a video phone call to help
Yes.
make something more believable, right? It's becoming better and better and better, and it is a significant event that is now achievable, right? Attackers are going to be able to do deep fakes of persons and voices and be able to potentially even get through authentication if there's voice authentication or facial authentication. So I think that's something that we need to be aware of and be leaning forward to understand that not only on the defensive side are we embracing AI and need to, but on the offensive side, the attackers are as well. So we need to understand that and recognize that if we don't embrace AI, then we are not playing on a level playing field.
Absolutely, I concur. Thank you. Thank you. Um, this person here, they wanted to, when you were teaching there, they wanted to be taught by you, but for students trying to break into the industry, how do you recommend balancing formal certifications, like CompTIA or Cisco, with hands-on and practical lab experience? We talked about before, and I told them you and Cisco and bringing forth there when after you had left. So how
Okay.
they do that?
Yeah, I think there's a balance, and I think we need to understand why that balance is in place. So, I was talking to a COO of a major company here in Colorado Springs just a few days ago about exactly this. And his initial thought, his initial opening argument was, I only hire people because of their hands-on experience. I want to know what hands-on experience someone has before I hire them. And that's what I'm going to base my decision on. And we had a good discussion. And in the end, I think where the discussion landed was, yeah, hands-on experience is really important. Certifications for someone who doesn't have the years of hands-on experience provide an initial baseline of knowledge that an employer or potential employer can rely on. And so I think they're both important. And so I don't steer students away from certifications. I don't steer students away from higher education and degrees in cybersecurity. And I also don't turn them away from building their own home labs because all of it is important. And I think it's also important to understand from the certification perspective The certifications, most certifications are not there to provide you with hands-on, you're ready to step into to a particular position immediately and start working on day one, right? They're there to provide you that baseline of foundational and fundamental knowledge that you can then build on with your employer or with your potential future employer. And so I think that when we do a certification, it's important to not just get the knowledge to be able to pass the certification, but to expand on that and to learn how to do the do of whatever certification you're doing. And I'll take Network Plus, for example. Network Plus is a great certification to have. It gives you that entry level foundational knowledge of networking. But does it force you to go and plug in a router? No, it doesn't. Does it force you to, get into a command line, a Cisco command line, and configure anything, DHCP forwarding, any of that? No, it doesn't. It just requires you to understand the basics. So to be employable, to be hireable, we need to go beyond the certification, and we need to recognize that that should be our end goal. Now, what I'm not saying is I'm not saying the certifications are not important. They are. And I'm not saying that you shouldn't give yourself a big pat on the back if you once you pass that certification, because it is a milestone. It is important. But we need to temper that with the fact that there are COOs out there in tech today that are looking for that hands-on. So we need to be able to describe it as well.
What do you think as far as the labs? Well, I know when I was teaching before at some other institutions, doing the labs, seeing you could see the difference later on when I talk with students that really immersed in the labs and not just the curriculum. Could you
Hmm.
speak on the labs for a minute? And there were some things
Yeah.
that you brought into play that actually helped me with my career.
Okay, great. Yeah, labs are important, and I think I've also done a lot of lab development for various organizations. So I've created a lot of those hands-on labs that you're going to be sitting down in front of to be working on. And when we do that, we are forced to be able to create a path, right? I want somebody to meet this objective. And to do that, they need to do this configuration. So I'm going to create a path for them to march down to be able to get to that configuration. And that can lead to a little bit of complacency because you're going to get almost a step by step of what you need to click and when you need to click it. And so it's easy to get through and click through the lab. But I encourage everyone when they're doing any sort of hands on labs, or even when they're just trying to configure their home lab, explore around, get curious, be professionally curious about how something works and why it works that way. I think that that curiosity will carry you almost an entire career. And I see it I see sometimes where students who don't have that professional curiosity and they're just clicking through the labs and memorizing the right answers, and yeah, they're going to pass the certification, and that's important, right? Big clap on the back. But when it comes to applying that knowledge, when it comes to being able to work in the field and in industry, that's where we're going to see that type of learner lag a little bit. So I encourage everyone to lean forward, be professionally curious, don't just click through the labs, but learn why things work and why things don't.
Absolutely. We have here. What is one common networking or security mistake you see technicians make in the field, and what essential tips can you share to help them troubleshoot efficiently or
Yeah.
effectively?
Okay. And I'm going to sound like a broken record here, but fundamentals, right? What I see is people relying too much on the tools without understanding the baseline technology. And then when the box doesn't click or fill out the way that it should, then we have to go back to those fundamentals. We have to fall back to, well, why does this work? And how did this work without this tool? And if I need to go do something manual, do I understand how to do that? And I think that's important not only in IT, but in other industries as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I can remember being in the field and just kind of thrown to the wolves and command line and terminal, and it's a weekend. I hope my old boss, doesn't remember that. Had some things that happened there, boy. Um, Tech jobs and future outlook. What advice would you give to job seekers looking to stand out in today's competitive tech job market, especially when trying to transition into specialized roles like network engineering or cybersecurity?
Yeah. Good question. I think that there's two different avenues to that answer. The first is I need to be technical enough to be able to support my application in that role. In other words, I do need to have the hands-on experience. I do need to have the certification. I do need to be able to configure a network, right? And there's lots of tools that we can use, many of them free, to be able to learn that hands-on. And then I think, secondly, we need to be able to market ourselves, right? And I think what I see a lot of people doing is they focus really heavily on the technical knowledge. And what they don't focus on is the personal presentation, right? How do you present yourself? How do you present what you know? And how do you fit into another company's culture? I've done a lot of interviews hiring on people. And one of the first things that I'm looking for when hiring is, how is this person going to fit in? How is their personality going to fit into our company culture, right? Because at that point, I've already seen a resume. I may have already sent them some type of tech application that they need to play around with to be able to demonstrate their technical knowledge. I may have asked them to record themselves teaching, right? I've already got a pretty good understanding of what their technical acumen is. The interview oftentimes isn't entirely about display your technical knowledge, but it's also about how are you going to fit into our company culture? And that goes back to, how do you prepare? How do you present yourself? And here's an example of my own. And this is an example of when I didn't do very good in an interview. And it was an interview to be a presenter, recording asynchronous content that would then be presented to students. And I had gathered myself a whole bunch of certifications, a whole bunch of knowledge, and I went into that interview thinking to myself, I need to display technical knowledge. And so I went in there with that mindset. And at the end of the interview, and I did, right? I think I did pretty good on that front. At the end of the interview, I asked, "Hey, I'm really excited for the potential of being part of this organization. Is there anything that I could do to make myself more competitive in this role?" Right? First of all, I would recommend everybody ask that question at the end of their interview process, because that gives the interviewer a chance to reflect back and then be like, "Yeah, you know what? You're at the top of the list, but there is one thing that you could do better," and that gives you the opportunity to go, you know what? I forgot to address that. Here's how I would address that. All right. Sorry for the sidebar. So I went into this interview thinking that I needed to display a bunch of technical knowledge. And at the end of the interview, I asked for some feedback. And the feedback that I got was, we didn't need you to display technical knowledge, right? We've already seen this, and this for your technical knowledge. Like, that's not under question. What we wanted in this interview was somebody who would look at the camera as a student. And we wanted to feel that personality coming through the camera. And you didn't do that, right? So I didn't get the job. But what I learned was, not only do I have to prepare myself for the technical side of the interview, but I need to prepare myself for how I present myself and how I defend my knowledge in that technical interview, because that translates directly to how I or anyone else is going to function in the workforce when they're dealing with peers or people that they work for, or even clients.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. And sometimes this technical field gets pretty pretty intense and competitive. So many questions I get through some of the social media platforms, and I'm getting ready to refer a few jobs later this evening to a few people. But now it's so many, I have to filter through the referrals because I have to look at who I'm sending and how, like you said, their personality will fit with that particular culture, especially the people who came and requested a candidate from me. Um,
Right.
what combination of certifications would you recommend that you teach in this day and age? What
Hmm.
combination?
Well, I think the first thing to understand is what your goal is. So create a path, right? And large learning models can help people do that. Create a path, understand what your goal is. If your goal is to be a network administrator, network technician, if you want to be out there installing people's cable, awesome. Build yourself your own path to be able to get there. Because CompTIA has built some paths, Cisco has built some paths, everyone has some paths, but they may not line up with exactly what you're trying to do. So let's see. If I want to be a security engineer, how important is servers to me? Well, maybe to some degree it is. How important is our databases to me? How important is management to me. Well, all of those are valuable certifications, but do they fall into the path that I need, the knowledge that I need to be able to get to that interview? Because in my mind, the certifications and to some degree, how well you explain your home lab are there to get you into the interview. Right? They're not to get you a job. I see a lot of people talking online about, oh, you can go and get this certification and then you're guaranteed to make this amount of money. I don't
Right.
believe that. I believe that the certifications and the knowledge are there to get you an interview. Once you're in the interview, they did their job. Now it's your turn to present yourself, to present technical knowledge, to make yourself, so important and so wanted in that organization that they have to hire you. And I think people fall down on that second step sometimes, right? We prepare for the technical, we don't prepare as much for the interview. And there's some very common interview things that are always going to happen. You can always expect behavioral questions like, tell us about a time when you didn't do well. Tell us about a time when you did. Tell us about a team that you led and how you made changes and how that helped you work better with others in the future, right? Those types of questions, those behavioral questions are always going to be in place. So have answers for them already, ready to go. That's important because then you can focus on presenting yourself in the best manner possible.
One question I absolutely promised to ask you about. They asked me to ask you about Net Plus and Cisco. How far apart are they when it comes to degrees of difficulty?
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I would say we'll compare Network Plus from CompTIA and CCNA's or Cisco's CCNA. And while
Mhm.
they do cover some foundational information, I think there's a difference in how the course material is written. CompTIA tends to be vendor neutral, right? So they will recognize that organizations like Cisco have a large market share. So when it's time to talk command line, they'll tend to lean in that direction. But sometimes they'll talk in generics and generalities, and so that's Network Plus. Cisco is like, no, no, no. We are Cisco. You need to learn our command line and things that we see important to the networking field. And so you get two different flavors. So I think difficulty, certainly, right? Here's an example. For most Network Plus courses that I have taught, it's about a 40 to 50 hour course if it's in person, right? For CCNA is built to be like a couple hundred hours of in person. So just by that difference alone, there is a difference in the amount of the material and a difference in the amount of hands-on understanding that Cisco wants you to have that Network Plus doesn't necessarily need you to have because that's not their focus, right? They're not neck deep in command line at CompTIA because that's not the focus of the certification. It's basic network understanding and awareness, and is really the launching point for how you develop your networking acumen. Whereas Cisco is saying, we are going to make you good at Cisco command line and networking. So there's a difference in the intent of the programs. As far as difficulty, I would say that I consider them both kind of entry level certifications. But I think most people will say that CCNA is more difficult than Network Plus just because of the hands on aspect of that certification.
Okay. One other thought I wanted to ask you was about the AWS certification that you used to teach or do teach. What's your take on the AWS certification? We now are in the cloud era. Well, we've been in there. It's just out now. And that AWS certification, of course, AWS covers a large amount of the cloud infrastructure here on Earth. So, could you give some feedback on that?
Yeah, I would say let me just start a couple years ago. A couple years ago, I think there was a big difference between on-premise networking and the certifications that supported those,
Mhm.
and cloud and the certifications that supported those. I think what we're seeing now, just because of what you just said, that networking and cloud implementation is everywhere, globally. Now we're seeing more of the cloud aspects fall into your basic networking courses as well, because your basic network technician needs to understand some aspects of the cloud as well. So when we get to AWS, when we get to solutions architect for AWS, those are I like to view them as networking applied to the cloud for a specific vendor. Azure is also a company that has a large market share in the cloud. So Azure, AWS, and then Google kind of have the majority, I guess, of the cloud space. There are certainly other cloud providers, but as far as certifications go, again, I think you need to think back to what your path wants to be, right? If I want just a generic certification, if I just want to understand generically what the cloud is, then yeah, CompTIA has Cloud Plus and Cloud Essentials for that reason. Are they going to dig specifically, neck deep into Azure, into Google Cloud, and into AWS? No, they're not. That's not the intent. But if you are like, no, I want AWS, like that's the cloud I want to work in, or that's the cloud that my employer wants me to work in, then focus your searches there on those certifications because they are important. And I think for every certification, what I like to do at some point, usually at the end of my learning, is kind of reflect back on, okay, where does this fit into everything else that I know? Right. And for cloud specifically, like where does that fit into everything else I know? Well, let's relate it to networking. Let's relate it to just a on-premise network and see that the constructs are the same. The infrastructure is very, very similar. We're going to have different terms. We're going to have different ways of accessing cloud infrastructure as opposed to on-premise infrastructure, but the concepts are the same. So let's see how it all fits in and ties together. Drawing those connections really does help not only for someone to understand the material better, but for them to be able to present it better, right? If I'm talking to you about cloud and I'm talking about virtual private clouds, you're like, whoa, hang on, what are you talking about? And I go, no, no, just think back to an on-premise network, right? That specific network or that subnet that you're working on, you can think of that as your virtual private cloud. And then those relationships, those connections between the two things, I think that's what makes a good and competent and intellectually and professionally curious practitioner. And that's what hiring managers want to see.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Jeremiah, we are at the end of our segment. I sincerely appreciate you taking the time. I was looking so forward to sending that message, and when I got that back, went out to celebrate. And but I do thank you so much for joining this podcast and all the things and the valuable information that you have given. And I look forward to speaking to you more. And I want to thank you all for joining today.